And welcome to the International News Daily Podcast. I'm your host, Dennis Dunicic. As always, like and comment on this video and subscribe to our channel to join our growing international community. Now let's get right into our story today, which concerns the United Kingdom or Britain. But in reality, this is actually a story about coronavirus, or more specifically, about how to react to coronavirus. Now, the United Kingdom has historically throughout the pandemic been very different than its European neighbors. And this story is going to focus on the United Kingdom and Europe's COVID outbreaks and COVID surges, and more specifically, what is going on today. Now, in Europe, mainland Europe, according to the World Health Organization, the only continent and only region where coronavirus is actually growing and spreading and is at its most dangerous is the continent of Europe. Cases are growing, and many countries, including Germany, Belgium, the Czech Republic, Austria, and many others, are introducing new restrictions, new measures, or even in the case of Austria, lockdowns and legally mandatory vaccines. In addition to this, many other European countries have, while not introduced mandatory vaccines, have created compulsory regulations and restrictions on the unvaccinated that is basically a de facto legal ruling that you have to be vaccinated to live a normal life in any of these countries. The United Kingdom, on the other hand, has been very different. Now, after July 19th of this year, which has been by the media and by most British people dubbed as Freedom Day, the United Kingdom dropped the vast majority of its restrictions, regulations, and mandates. Life in Britain has been completely normal. While bars and Christmas markets and restaurants are closed in Vienna, Austria, they are open in London. People are enjoying their time with their friends, with their family. They're walking around the cities, and they're living what is relatively a normal life before the pandemic. Now, there is a new normal. Many people still wear masks, many people are vaccinated, and many people take a lot of precautions to avoid COVID-19. However, the United Kingdom is a much better picture of pre-pandemic life than Europe itself. But the reason that I wanted to do this story today is because of the efficacy of mandates. While Europe, mainland Europe, has been facing a surge and a growth and a new wave of coronavirus infections, the United Kingdom has actually been doing much, much better. Now, I do want to state, before I move forward with the report, that the UK has actually had one of the worst outbreaks of COVID-19. Now, in terms of deaths, the UK has had 145,000 deaths as a result of the coronavirus. It is the second most amount of deaths in Europe following Russia. In addition to this, the Delta virus surge completely ravaged the country during summer. But now, the UK is actually doing relatively well, despite not having any mandates, not having any lockdowns, not even forcing people to wear masks, or even making vaccines mandatory to enter any place, restaurant, bar, or whatever. The UK does not have the notorious COVID passport. So how is this possible? How is the United Kingdom, who has taken a very, very, let's say, liberal or open approach to COVID mandates, how is it faring so much better than continental Europe? Most continental European countries have either introduced complete lockdowns for the unvaccinated, have made vaccines mandatory, or have de facto forced people to get vaccinated, while the UK does not do the same. And the UK is doing much better. On average, in the past month, the United Kingdom has had about 40,000 coronavirus infections on a daily basis. Now, 40,000 sounds like a lot, and it is a big number. 40,000 is a large number. But when you look at it in context, it's not that big. The United Kingdom has a population of 67.22 million people. very large population, and very small and very good numbers in terms of coronavirus infections. So what's going on? Basically, what's happening is Boris Johnson, Prime Minister Boris Johnson's government, Tory government, has taken an approach of persuasion instead of compulsion. Now, mainland Europe has taken an approach of compulsion, compulsing or mandating or forcing people to get vaccinated, to follow mandates, and legally institute restrictions or lockdowns in some countries. While the United Kingdom has not done any lockdowns, it has not forced vaccinations upon anyone, and it has not created any legal barriers to living a normal life. Now, Boris Johnson's government, despite not creating mandates, has persuaded the people of the United Kingdom to get vaccinated, to social distance, to wear masks, and to regulate themselves. Because, believe it or not, most adults who are grown-ass people can actually regulate themselves in the time of a pandemic and ensure that they are not getting other people sick or themselves sick. So the UK's approach right now is fundamentally better than Europe's. And the reason why is pretty simple. When you look at most mainland European countries where vaccines are almost essentially de facto mandated or required, where people are forced to, by law, wear masks everywhere they go, where they are forced to social distance, the spread of conspiracy theories occurs, and people lose trust in the government. In the UK, where none of this is required, people are still doing it. While the government doesn't tell you you have to wear a mask in Britain, people are still wearing masks. While the government says that you should be social distancing, people are still social distancing. And this is not just a theory or an opinion. Migration and movement and travel data from Britain shows that people are traveling less after the pandemic. While the British government is not telling people you have to get vaccinated to enter this place or that place, they are still getting vaccinated. The United Kingdom has a vaccination rate of 68%, and that's a full vaccination rate. In terms of people that have received their first dose, which means they're most likely to become fully vaccinated eventually, 88% of people have been vaccinated. That is a really big number. Now, it's not as high as its mainland European neighbors. Despite this, the United Kingdom has a very high vaccination rate, and it has a very low amount of infections. And in addition to this, while the United Kingdom is, on average, having 40,000 infections a day, that is the same amount of infections they were having last year. Now, the main difference between this year, 2021, and 2020, last year, is vaccines. Vaccines are more predominantly used and they are widespread, and most Britons are vaccinated. And despite the fact that there is the same amount of infections of coronavirus, the amount of death and the amount of hospitalization is significantly less. While the UK watches other European countries like the Czech Republic, like Germany, like Austria, like Slovakia, have their hospitals overflooded and overfilled with COVID patients, their hospitals and their National Health Service, which is a source of pride for many British people, is not overworked. That being said, there is still a lot of work of meeting surgeries and other non-COVID related operations that were paused and stopped during the COVID pandemic spike in Britain. So maybe the United Kingdom's approach of persuasion instead of compulsion is a better way to take care of the coronavirus. Now, some experts have stated that the reason the UK is not having so many infections and is not suffering the wave is because the Delta variant of corona, and keep in mind, the reason that mainland Europe, that countries like Germany, Austria, the Czech Republic, Croatia, Slovenia, Italy, etc., are having more infections is because of the Delta variant, which is much more easily transmitted than normal coronavirus. The UK had the Delta variant surge during the summer. And during the summer, respiratory diseases are much less likely to spread. Now, there is an epidemiological theory as to why the UK is not having as much of a problem with coronavirus today as it did before. But that being said, the reality is, despite all these experts calling for and saying the UK needs to introduce mask mandates, it should introduce a lockdown, it should introduce these restrictions, the reality is the UK is doing well, and it's probably not going to have another wave of infections. And as a country, it has shown, and Boris Johnson's government, and a lot of people like to call him Peppa the Pig or call him a walking scarecrow because of his funny hair. And a lot of people think that he's goofy or a bad prime minister. But the reality is Boris Johnson's government has created a very good model on how to react to coronavirus. The British government understands that the people living in its country are grown adults that know that coronavirus is a threat. Grown adults that have self and personal responsibility to wear masks, to distance themselves socially when it's necessary, to get vaccinated, and take personal responsibility. While other governments in Europe have taken an approach of being a parent or a mother government, where they tell people you have to get vaccinated, you have to social distance, you have to wear masks. And this approach, clearly, by the numbers of infections and by the rates of growing COVID virus surges in mainland Europe, has shown that it is not effective. So maybe the reality is that instead of forcing people to wear masks, instead of forcing them to social distance by regulations and laws, and instead of forcing them to get vaccinated, maybe the best approach is to just trust people and believe that they will be responsible for themselves. That's my report for today. I do want to hear your opinion. Do you think that governments, and I'm not just talking about the United Kingdom, I'm talking about Europe, the entire world, do you think a more restrictive approach or a more government-involved approach is appropriate, such as mandating vaccines, mandating masks, or mandating social distancing? Or do you believe that just letting people be socially responsible is the best approach? Now, do keep in mind, while the UK government has not mandated anything, they have not been opposed to it. They have, and Boris Johnson himself has said, get vaccinated, wear masks, social distance. It's not required by law, but they have just been persuading people. Do you believe that persuasiveness is better than making things compulsory? I thank you for tuning in. I look forward to your comments, and I look forward to our discussion. I'll see you guys next time.